Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about quantitative rating scales. If you've seen some of our previous videos about statistics or performance, this is going to be working very closely with those. I know I talked in the introduction video about satisfaction being very qualitative based, but quantitative scales do have a part to play with satisfaction. So, quantitative metrics produce numerical outcomes. They can be used to compare satisfaction scores over time or with competitors. It gives you that great benchmark because they are trackable over time. And for that reason, they are highly sought out by managers because they can define what is going on. However, they have a limitation. They only show what is happening and not why. And that is why quantitative scales need to come with qualitative scales. Now, there are two main kinds of scale you can use. There's Likert scales and there's semantic differential scales. Let's start with the first one, Likert scales. You see them all the time, and this is where you present somebody with a series of options and you say how much you agree with the statement. So, I really enjoy using this website. 1 is strongly disagree, or 5 strongly agree. So you can turn your emotions into numbers. Now this is not actually quantitative because, the difference between strongly disagree and disagree is different for every single person. So everyone might interpret the pieces differently. Because of that, you've got to use neutral language in a statement. So this website is beautiful and this website is very beautiful have very different answers. We can strongly agree with something being beautiful, but we may not strongly agree with it being very beautiful. So there's 3 kinds of Likert scales you can use. There's the basic one, which is just a 3-point scale. This is something which is very useful when working with children or when your users really aren't good at making decisions. It's good, bad, or don't know. Most common one you'll see is a 5-point scale, which is going from very dissatisfied all the way to satisfied. And this is very good to put yourself into. You can go, well, I'm not all the way there, but I'm kind of there, just in the middle. Then there's 7 and 9-point scales. Now, you do see 7-point scales quite a lot. There's good reason to have them. And 9-point scales are making more headway these days than they used to, but you want to avoid 9-point scales unless the user is an absolute expert in their own opinion and what they're talking about. So to make life easy, stick to 5 and you're good. A different way of taking things and turning emotions into numbers is through semantic differential scales. This is where you present the user with pairs of bipolar or opposite adjectives, and it gives a similar outcome to a Likert scale because it's exploring the way the user describes something rather than how much they agree with the statement. So, is the website homepage weak or is it strong? So this is all about the strength. The attractiveness is the ugly beautiful. The excitement is the cool warm. The level of excellence is the amateur professional. So you got a concept underlying everything. Now, these scales can be difficult to think about in the right time because what one person might think of as 2 polar opposites might not be true for everyone. So you've got to really iterate it and work it out. Don't feel that you can just take a stab in the dark. Likert scales are the same, so it is much better to take off-the-shelf metrics and use those instead of creating your own metrics. So 3 metrics that are really incredible to use in determining satisfaction is the after Scenario Questionnaire, the expectation measure, and the system usability scales. As a UX designer, you'll be using these scales all the time to understand the usability of your website. So the after Scenario Questionnaire is a very simple way of understanding satisfaction. You give 3 questions to people after they've used website and completed a task, which is, I'm satisfied with the ease of completing the task in this scenario. I'm satisfied with the amount of time it took me to complete the task in this scenario. I'm satisfied with the support information, such as online help, messages, documentation, when completing a task. Now, this is done with the Likert scale on a scale of 1 to 5. So it's what you use when you want a very quick, very simple measure of satisfaction. In the early days of your first prototypes, ASQ is a fantastic choice to make. The other methods of evaluating are more sophisticated, so they are more suited to the later levels of iteration. So I would think, the first prototype is excellent for ASQ. And here we are, an example. Somebody has ticked in, disagreeing, neutral and disagreeing, for whatever reason it is. Now the ASQ has a maximum score of 15 and the lowest score is going to be 3. So you could work out as you like. So when you're thinking about ASQ for this person, they are scoring 7 because it's 2 plus 3 plus 2. Ideally, you want to be scoring 12 or above, and it just gives you a good benchmark. The next level is more about, once you've got a website up and running, how should we be developing it? So you're focusing on how well the website met the user's expectations, rather than just going, is it good or bad? Now, you want to delight someone by exceeding their expectations, and you want to avoid the misery of underperformance. So, very simple. Before you give someone a task, so you show them the website and go, how easy or difficult do you think this task will be to complete? And they're going to give you a score. Well, I think it's going to be very, very difficult. It's going to be, give it a 1 because it's really difficult. And then they do the task, and then afterwards they go, well, how was that? Well, I think that was, that was actually very easy to do. I quite liked that. So I'm going to give that a 7. So you've now got someone who thought it was going to be very bad, and actually it's really good. That's a great place to be. So you can do that many times with different people, and you just map their expectations of what they thought it was going to be and what it actually was on a chart. You see here that when you got, we think it's going to be very hard, but actually it's very easy. This is something that you want to promote because, we've made this hard thing really great. If someone thought it was going to be hard, they thought it was going to be hard and it was very hard, this is a big opportunity for you to actually improve this, because it's what they think. It's not a bad thing, but if we can make this easier, then we're going to be excelling and it will be something that we will be promoting in the future. If your users thought it was going to be very easy and it was very easy, leave it. That whatever's going on there is working really well. And then finally is the worst area, where people think it's going to be very easy and it turns out to be seriously hard. That is something that you must fix right away. So whereas ASQ you'd use at the very start of your iteration process, your first prototypes, when you get to that middle territory where you're working out, you got the big picture of the design, you're working out, now how do the nuts and bolts work? How do the functions of the website work? Then the after Scenario Questionnaire is, this is really fantastic, because you can see which parts to leave, which parts to push forward, and which parts need further iteration. And that leads us to the next part, which is the System Usability Scale. The System Usability Scale is the most sophisticated of the satisfaction metrics. It's not difficult to work with, actually it's very simple, but it gets to more detail about how everything works. For that reason, you'd lead this to the end of the design process. So you've done your after Scenario Questionnaire, you've done your expectation measure, you've iterated through, you get into that final design where you're putting the polish on, making something look and feel real in your final prototype, bring in your SUS and make it work really well. So you give people 10 questions, and these are 10 questions with a bit of a twist. So I'm not going to read them all out, they're on the screen, you can read them quite quickly, but you'll notice that question 1 is, I think I'd like to use the system frequently. That's a positive word. Next one, I found the system unnecessarily complex, which is a negative. And the questions go back and forth, giving you positive and negative statements. Now, this is because some people really are attracted towards positive statements, And some people are really attracted to negative statements. By giving both, it evens out the curve quite nicely. So it's not quite as simple as the after scenario questionnaire. We're just giving 3 numbers and adding them up. You've got to do a little bit of maths in this, but it's very simple. Now, SUS is the most common usability scale. You see it everywhere. I use it everywhere. It is absolutely fantastic because it works. And like any metric, you can track it over time. You can compare websites. It's wonderful. So what you do is you take items 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. The score which person gave out of 5, you take that and remove 1. Numbers 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, you take 5 and remove what the user gave. So if they gave a score of 1, 5 minus 1 equals 4. Then you add up all these new scores, times by 2.5, and that's your SUS score. And this SUS score is really easy to interpret because if it's below 50, that really is not acceptable. We can't deal with this. Between 50 and 70 is a good satisfaction. We like this, but frankly, it has to be above 70 for us to be really happy. So let's go and calculate through again. Once again, the first few items, it's the value which the person gave, minus 1. And that's for the other questions, so 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, it's 5 minus what they gave you, total score times 2.5. Right, simple maths. Let's go and do this together. So here's the scores which one person gave an SUS score. Doesn't really matter what they are. That's just what they quoted on a 5-point Likert scale. So we take the first items, the odd ones, and we go value minus 1. So 4 minus 1 is 3, 5 minus 1 is 4, etc. Then we take the even numbers and we go 5 minus whatever equals number. So 5 minus 5, 0. 5 minus 1 is 4, etc. Then, really simple maths, add them all together, times 2.5, we can get SUS score of 75. So we are actually really happy with that. It's above our expectations. We can stop, don't worry, everything is fine. Now, in our example, I'm going to go into a bit more about this, so you'll see this very soon. But before I go on to the next video, or before you go to the next video, I want to say something about collecting scale data. Now, scale data is been going on for centuries. You can do it in paper, so just handing somebody a form and they tick boxes, and that's great because everyone knows what it is, they're familiar with it. We've all got pens around us, and it's very good. But you've got to then go data entry, which is why I don't recommend paper for Likert scales. I always use online surveys. Even if I'm with the person in the room, I'll hand them an iPad with a Google Forms survey on because, there's no data entry. Everything's there and it's fast. Not everyone does trust these things. They get a bit uppity. If you give them a QR code, they might not be happy with it. But generally, it's not a problem. And that's getting more and more as we go through the decades. So I'm going to give you 4 websites which I use all the time. So Google Forms is fantastic for just collecting items. Microsoft Forms is getting better and better. It's not quite as user-friendly as Google Forms, but it's something you should be thinking of. Or you can go for more proprietary systems. So Bristol Online is a really, really good website. I've used them in my research before and I recommend them. But if you're working in China, none of these systems works. Now, Microsoft Forms may work in China, but it's a bit debatable. So wjx.com is a company called SoJump. They are Chinese based, so if you want to survey people in China, I recommend those. Hopefully that's given you an insight into the quantitative measures that you use to understand satisfaction. In the next video, I'm going to go over the qualitative measures.